The Infinite Self by James Mahu. Mochi. The Infinite Self. Question: what is the Infinite Self? Answer: unlike what many believe, this consciousness is not a personality like a finite temporal human being. It is not a human being. It is an infinite being. Nor is it like the idealized gurus, masters, avatars, even gods. Those are all reflections of the personality of a human being. The infinite being is simultaneously sovereign and integral. Its sensory system is so different from our human self that we cannot bring it into our physical, emotional, and mental dimensional constructs. How would we put an ocean into a drop of water? Well, the answer to this question is important to understand. The ocean and the drop are the same materiality. They're simply at different levels of scale. They are nested within one another. They are dimensions of infinitude that stretch on without end or beginning of any substantive definition. There are no definitions for the infinite self that we can relate to as a finite self. All sovereign life forms are parts of an infinite self, and this infinite self is part of a planetary consciousness. And this planetary consciousness is part of a galactic consciousness. And it goes on, beyond what is necessary to understand as a human being within our space-time. Thus, the whole of us is fractured into sovereign parts, and we forget the whole and become the part. We forget the ocean and become the drop, and that drop becomes an ocean we call our local universe. The infinite self is not a physical body. It is a consciousness that is bodiless, and yet it occupies countless bodies. This is the ultimate secret that has been veiled. We believe that extraterrestrials exist, and yet we do not know that we are infinite beings, sovereign and integral, existing as consciousness in an infinite space-time. We journey into a planetary space-time and embody a finite life form or interface, and we exist temporally in that life form. That life form is one of many that we experience in order to live as our infinite self in space-time dimensions that we create. We create both the veil and the lifting of it. We invest in the slow, dense vibration of physical space-time to create experiences that are literally our creations, no different than when an artist paints a canvas. Life itself is the canvas, and in a single lifetime we can paint millions of canvases. In a way, every moment is a canvas. The infinite self is an artist. Every single one of us is an artist of profound skills, imaginations, and an unseverable connection with our infinite self. And through this connection, the one and all, unconditional love is easy and natural for all of us to understand because we are granted this from one and all due to our interconnection. Translating this understanding into behavior is quite another thing, hence the qualifying word, imperfect. In language we sculpt. We remove words as much as we create words. And from these words we create understanding. And from this we either move closer to an understanding of who our infinite self is, and why our infinite self is embodied in a finite self, or we remain our human self confined in a temporal space-time duality. When these words tumble out upon our table of comprehension, they leave out more than they include. They paint different pictures of reality, many of which are shockingly abstract and impossible to understand. This is the nature of words and language of the infinite self. They condense truth to such a degree as to leave them less about understanding truth and more about conforming to falsehoods. Human beings make mistakes that are unaligned to social norms, religious doctrines, philosophical ethics, and personal beliefs. However, this misalignment is a perception of the finite human self, not the infinite self. Everything is aligned to the infinite self, even when it appears not to be aligned to the finite self. And, again, it is not a matter of perfection. It is a matter of expanding our expression of imperfect, unconditional love, and in doing that, feeling our connection. One nurtures the other. This is the state of the infinite self, imperfect, unconditional love. The imperfect stems from the worlds of the finite self, while the unconditional love stems from the worlds of the infinite self. The infinite self that we all possess access to is brought into the finite world through the acts of imperfect, unconditional love. It is not the epiphany that is described as a cosmic consciousness event, a sudden revelation. It is a constant behavior rooted in imperfect, unconditional love and kindness. The kind that cannot be judged or given a purpose. The kind that must flow from its natural source. Otherwise, it will not be authentic, natural, and wise. The expression of our infinite self will always be different from the next person. This is what makes it our infinite self. The uniqueness of our finite self crafts our infinite self when viewed from our local universe as a human being. Each of us, in effect, creates the infinite self that is our unique expression of it within space-time duality, in the dimensions where we exist only as our infinite self. These finite interpretations remain a part of the infinite self that we experience, while knowing that we are only experiencing an infinitesimally small fraction of the whole of us. The infinite self is the one who always initiates the partnership with the finite self. It is the one who awakens us. It is the one who draws the elements and resources into our local universe that allows us to expand our awareness. That stimulates our understanding of what we have always defined as unconditional love in whatever languages of space-time. The infinite self embodies within our physical, emotional, and mental bodies. It is the consciousness behind the mind and its apparatus. Its closest ally is the imagination. It whispers there first. And from the imagination, it passes to the subconscious. And from the subconscious, our physical mind creates thoughts and beliefs. And it is these that bring us to the philosophy and worldview that define us in a particular space-time. The infinite self does not announce itself with bold words and bravado. It separates itself from itself in order to experience space-time duality through an infinite variety of forms that have one thing in common. None of them remembers their infinite self with any degree of precision. However, in whatever form it takes, it remains tethered to the infinite self. Once it is a form, that sovereign being remains a sovereign being. The infinite self does not behave or operate in the construct of dualities. If it did, duality would present a serious problem, because the infinite self would have a very narrow span of diversity. The infinite self would choose the same path to remember itself, and all species would lose their diversity, and it is precisely diversity that fuels the evolution of the infinite self. Thus, free will was a necessary ingredient to create both diversity and authenticity within the infinite self that lives inside us, every single one of us, in every single life form, in every single space-time, in every single dimension. It is one and all, not in name, but in form and presence. Everything is it. If it is existent, it is infinite. And this is because the consciousness that is energetic, not physical, powers the physical. And the thing that powers the energetic is increasingly subtle to an infinite degree. When traced back far enough, it is pure intelligence of a cosmic, interdimensional, interconnected, inscrutable nature. It is an intelligence that we, in our human state of mental machinery and technological prosthetics, cannot overestimate or define. Yet this intelligence is the intelligence that created the infinite self, imbued it with sovereignty in spacetime, provided free will to it within the genome of its incarnation, and then cast it within spacetime at its own beckoning to learn and share the learning with one and all. That is the intelligence within us, that connects us, that powers us. That is us. We have accepted the drop of water as our identity, while we think of the ocean as a mere abstraction, dream, or imaginative mythology. We are the partnership between our finite selves and the infinite self. Partnership must be equitable. The infinite self supplies the unconditional love, and the finite self supplies the imperfection of free will within space-time duality. Some might think that space-time duality is a dream world or illusion that doesn't really exist. It is real. It exists. It is infinite. Every single atom is infinite. In part, this is why our physicists remind us that our physical bodies are made of stars. When we make a partnership with our finite self and our expression of the infinite self, we create something like a portal that consists of imperfect, unconditional love. And that is the space we try to open up, to avail, to manifest, to breathe in and out into our world, to experience in our local universe. Not because it seems like the right thing to do, but because we see the intelligence of it, and we want to be aligned to that intelligence. That is when you know the infinite self is no longer whispering to your finite self. That is when you know that you are an infinite, sovereign facet of the infinite self, which itself is a facet of one and all. And that these facets are like a fractal pattern that scales infinitely in all directions. And there is only one intelligence that unifies this infinite diversity. And this intelligence manifests itself in space-time duality as life. We are it. And yet we see our intelligence as a human being as an average rating of 100 IQ points. Perhaps an AI has 150 IQ points with an exponential curve. But what is the intelligence of? The thing that unifies all into one? Can we place a number on it? Of course not. Yet that intelligence is accessible within us, but it is not informational in the sense of codified knowledge. It is instead more of an agnostic, philosophical belief system whose output is behavioral intelligence, and the very core of this belief system is unconditional love and kindness. Surrounding this core are the imperfect realizations of a finite self, burdened with a sensory interface that proposes survival above all else. And in this path to survival, we see, feel, think, and imagine our life as a physical, finite body that must fit into a social system that is not of our making. And all this time, we were an infinite being interconnected to all life in an impossibly intelligent system of unconditional love. It has no organization or brand. No one owns it or defines it. We do all of that. We make it space-time relevant. We embed our biases and beliefs into it, and we choose sides. We are Christian or Muslim. We are Hindu or Buddhist. We are Protestant or Catholic. We are agnostic or atheist. We are a choice given to an answer. Yet the infinite self is not in any of those answers, because those answers are owned, branded, marketed, money-making machines as helpful to socialization as they may be. They lead us to answers that have been approved by thousands of people over thousands of years. When all this time, within us, is the intelligence of the infinite self. We have the innate partnership to uncover, to dust off, and shine up. We can invoke this partnership between our finite and infinite self. We can manifest this space within our local universe where we create imperfect, unconditional love through our behaviors. None of that requires a brand, a church, a temple, or mosque. None of it requires an organization or membership fees. None of it requires a book. None of it requires a mantra or a prayer. None of it requires a manifestation or a state of consciousness. None of it requires a certain vibration or aura. None of it requires an astrological chart or gift. We align to this intelligence through our beliefs, which build our behaviors. The other ways are fine too. There is no right or wrong here. It is simply a matter of choice to align to this intelligence, form a partnership between our finite and infinite self, and manifest imperfect, unconditional love within our local universe. If we choose not to do this, there will be no punishment from this intelligence or the infinite self. There will be no checkmark against us that says, discard this sinful human. We are not punished because we sin. We do not sin. We cross lines of social norms, and society, in its best interest, punishes the one who crosses the line. So each species has its social norms, and these norms are policed and regulated through social conditioning. The infinite self, and our sovereign expression of the infinite self in a temporal form, are not passing judgment. This intelligence of one and all is not passing judgment and assigning sins. The hierarchy of consciousness is unified, and thus there is no hierarchy. We live to learn and share, to understand breadth and depth, to behave in accord to imperfect, unconditional love, and sometimes to cross the lines of social norms. To test reality's rules, and to expand those rules. Isn't it amazing that the self-proclaimed greatest democracy on earth didn't allow women to vote until 1920? This is but one example of how close we live to inequity, injustice, and a defiled state of consciousness. Our particular space-time in the 21 stone century is not that far removed from colonialism, caste systems, oligarchies, royalty, and religious rule. Those are elements of our collective past and in many cases even our present. The polarity of these two forces, the rules and punishments of an outside authority, and the freedom to choose our infinite self, define our times, our presence as a people, our values as a species, even our stewardship of Earth. This is why we are given the free will to decide to whom we align. Is it our infinite self or our finite self as an unsuspecting mouthpiece of an outside authority? We can say that our infinite self is too much a stretch for us to believe. It is too abstract. It is so far removed from us that we cannot possibly have a sense of it, and therefore our finite self wins. We want to win in the space-time of our local universe. That is our focus. How do we define winning? In today's world, it is hard to say unless you define the generation, subculture, location, and state of affairs. All of those factors matter as to what defines winning. The common denominator across these factors is that they are concerned with the finite self at the exclusion of the infinite self. Winning is joy, happiness, success, health, peace, financial independence, loving relationships, and 1,000 other things. In the infinite self, can there be a concept of winning? If we do this or that, do we win or lose? Just as with sin, winning is not a concern or factor with the infinite self. It is neither an expectation or aspiration. The infinite self is exclusively the behavior of imperfect, unconditional love and kindness within one's local universe. It is not done to win or avoid losing. It is done because we understand that there is an intelligence that unifies all into one, and that intelligence is what we align to through our behavior. If the intelligence is of unity, then our behavior is one of unification, and the belief in and behavior of imperfect, unconditional love and kindness is an excellent way to unify within space-time duality. The infinite self is defined by the consciousness and energy of unconditional love. The return of this energy, rebounding to its source, is then the interpretation of the infinite self, and therefore its creation as well. Thus, unconditional love is both an expression of behavior and an interpretation of belief, and these two aspects constitute the outer and inner aspects of the infinite self.